All right, our last talk before we have our general discussion comes at us remotely, and it is Arvind Chandna. He's another of our clinical researchers here, and I believe one of the last class of Jampolsky Fellows. This is a recorded conversation with a mother and daughter pair where the younger person is a CVI patient. So there is a lot of first person on the ground experience that we're going to hear from here. And then after that, the panelists who are in the room, I will try to get you guys to come up to the front. So please stick around for that. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. This is the time we talk about a condition called cerebral visual impairment. Some of you may have heard about it, and some of you, it may be a new thing. And I hope this conversation that you're about to hear is going to inform you about CVI and give you some insights and also provide some more interest in scientific research. In this conversation, a young CVIer May and her parent Katie take us through their journey, provide an insight in the visual processing of the CVIer brain, talk about accommodations that help, challenge the current traditional top-down approach, and importantly for this audience, discuss directions for future scientific study that would benefit the CVIer, the family, the school, and integration into society. Could you tell us what were the main visual function challenges that you faced initially? And as you've grown, May, and as Katie, as you watch May grow, what are they now?
My entire visual field will shake whenever I move my head. So like if I do this, my entire visual field shook with it. And then my viewing area is about that big. And then within that, sometimes it will disappear entirely.
The viewing area?
Yeah, sometimes my viewing area will disappear entirely and just get snagged on random inconsistent things that then I can't piece together to make any real useful information about anything. And then within my viewing area, I can't recognize anything in it. So it's just like a colorful blur, because I like to say that the only part of my vision that does work is my color vision. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say my vision really has changed over time, but it does definitely change with environmental differences. So like if I'm in the children's area of a public library and there's a toddler playing trains with his mom, that will definitely affect my vision. Or I think a really good example of this is whenever I would go to birthday parties and it was time for the cake to come out, and I would get so stressed and visually overwhelmed because I was excited to see the cake like all the other kids, but I had such a hard time finding where the cake was in the whole party and then navigating to get to see it. And then because all the kids wanted to see it at once and were simultaneously saying what slice they wanted, I didn't have the proper time and like thinking capacity to look at the cake and then decide what slice I wanted. I think another really good example of this is whenever I go to a grocery store or like a public space like this, including ones that I go to on a regular basis, where my mom could like walk around a corner and I would lose visual attention of her and have no idea if she teleported to New Mexico or something, or all the way to the end of the store, or just around the corner, or if she'd gone back to the start. And then I wouldn't be able to have enough visual information to really independently navigate in a consistent way to find my mom. And I couldn't be able to read any of the signage to like figure out where I was in the world.
So we knew May had that level of distress, but I think without a background in neurology or vision or even what sensory impairment looks like, there was no way that my husband and I could make the connections between space to space, because now it seems very clear with knowing what we know now about CVI and just visual impairment in general, her challenges make sense, and how the environment is going to impact them. We can make a pretty close guess as to what supports are going to be needed. And we can talk about those things. So bringing them to conscious awareness with a child to be able to make a plan has made an enormous difference in her ability to engage in the world positively.
Very interesting. So there are significant challenges in everyday life that you describe. These are everyday activities which we assume naturally through our non-conscious vision and don't even pay any attention to it. Whereas for you, it seems like one of the biggest challenges, and that's why I think these challenges are called visually guided behavioral difficulties. What you described at the beginning about your visual field being just this much to be able to see anything, and then everything else is a blur or not seen, is known in the literature, neurology literature, as simultagnosia. It remains to be seen yet, with hopefully with proper investigation, whether it's the same simultagnosia that we know in neurological conditions with known lesions of the brain to what you experience, because one of the important aspects of CVI, which we've discussed before, and just want to inform the audience, is that the visually guided behavioral or cognitive challenges that you have are because in CVI, children do not necessarily develop these abilities, which neurotypicals, as we call them, would develop automatically without making an effort, just being exposed to a normal environment. So in a way, I find that children with CVI may have these difficulties, even not knowing they have these difficulties.
Yes.
So we're just bringing this together to say that's important for everybody to realize that children who grow up with CVI do not even know what the world should look like. And unless given the diagnosis and given the resources and help and support, they never will. Could you describe how do you actually make sense of the world with CVI? And if possible, describe a couple of strategies that have helped you the most.
So, like you said, I've developed a whole bunch of compensatory strategies over my life just without realizing it. And I think the biggest one is that if I look at anything, in order to identify it, because I can't recognize it, I will imagine
Visually, you can't recognize it.
Visually, I can't recognize it. I will imagine touching and feeling it, because if I can link a tactile memory or a storyline or an emotional memory to it, then that is a different type of memory than visual that then I can link to it. And I think a really good example of this is how I make memories, because I can't make a visual memory inside of my head. So I'm using these same strategies to build up memories and identification strategies. I'm going to use the example of how I remember a chicken. So when I immediately think of a chicken,
We have some very adorable chickens.
yeah, so I do need to know what they are. The first thing I think of is
When you see one,
yeah,
when you recall a memory.
when I recall a memory, and then these are also the things I'm using to be sure that what I'm looking at is a chicken.
Gotcha.
So the first thing I think of or would look for is the specific color of my favorite chicken. And then I will think of the like specific texture of their feathers, and then the different kinds of feathers, and then like how you properly hold the chicken and what their crop feels like, and the different texture of their feet. And all these things I will apply to when I'm looking at the chicken to properly be mostly sure that it is a chicken.
When May was little, before she had a CVI diagnosis, we did notice that she was a very deep thinker and a natural artist was what we were thinking to ourselves. So we noticed early on from toddlerhood that space had to be created around May's processing time when she was engaging with something. And we didn't know why, but it didn't really seem like a problem because she loved engaging with anything in her environment, especially if she could touch, talk about, or experience it through her senses other than vision.
Yeah. And pretty soon after my diagnosis, I realized that one of my strongest sensory modalities was actually touch.
Yeah.
So we switched to having all of my instructional material in Braille, and I learned Braille, and that has been absolutely revolutionary to not need to be using like exhausting visual resources to try and do all of my schoolwork, and it completely avoids the problem of that I can't recognize letters. And so getting literacy through a tactile means just completely avoided that problem. As well, having a long white cane to bring with me everywhere has been amazing, and learning O&M with the support of other blind people has been absolutely amazing in just like both feeling and being safer and more confident in the world as I navigate it.
That's amazing. You know, in the past, I was trained as an ophthalmologist or even as a vision clinician scientist, that we have to always try and improve vision to make people see better. And what I've learned from you, Katie and May, is that we need to get rid of that idea and think about, which lots of people in low vision already know, but mostly in blindness only, that we have to use the other senses to teach vision. I remember saying that one of my best teachers in low vision told me that vision is the tutor for all the other senses. But if vision is not good enough, then you should use the other senses to train vision. You described that you use a visual sense, like color, to identify a chicken, but then you need all the other senses to help you identify the chicken, to make sure that it's a chicken, and maybe even realize which one is it amongst your adorable chickens. So I think that is a message that certainly the people dealing with blind people are aware of, the scientists, but I don't think the people dealing with low vision or cerebral visual impairment even, as scientists or clinicians, are aware of, to not shy away from using the other senses to help vision see better in a way.
Because I have a limited amount of like visual resources that I can use up in a day. And if I use too much, it'll even go into the next few days' resources. And so if I do a too visual task, then I can be in bed like for the next day afterward because I've used up too much vision. And it's not like that's like within 3 hours of vision use. That can be within like 1 hour of trying to like walk around my local town without a cane, or 20 minutes of trying to read and print.
Where do you think we should be directing the research efforts in CVI?
We should be seeing what happens when CVIers are tested in imperfect conditions. Because for me, if I'm in a space that is loud and cluttered and there are people moving around and there is like, it's a little bit hotter than normal, that will all affect my CVI so much. And you're going to see a lot more of my challenges than if you're testing me in a air-conditioned, controlled, quiet, low lighting room where I have a lot more brain power and just ability to be figuring out how the tests work and finding strategies around using my vision. I think it's important to be testing CVIers when they are given a chance to truly learn using a different modality of learning, like specifically Braille or with audio formats. Because for me, Braille has been the only way that I've been able to access literacy, and I think it can be really informative to have lots of research on that topic.
I also think access to totally non-visual skills has not in any way reduced her use or ability to learn through her functional vision. In fact, allowing that shift to happen to non-visual skills has caused her to maximize use of her vision moment to moment and across really varying environments that previously would have totally shut her down. She surprises us on a daily basis of what she can do now. There's no way that she could ever separate out her visual and non-visual senses because her brain has been developing from birth, taking in visual information through CVI as her lens. So she has really a lifetime of adaptive sensory integration experiences informing her ability to find the optimal, most efficient way to be safe and seek out the learning and connection that she desires. So I would say it's pretty essential from our perspective that research in such a complex scenario as CVI result in more information about the most adaptive ways that CVI brains can access the world, including optimizing use of senses other than vision.
Yes.
And acknowledging the huge barrier of variable sensory environments all day, every day.
Yeah.
That was beautifully said and summarized. And I think it's important for all of us to realize, working in vision science laboratories, to bring in conditions which resemble the natural environment, or carry out our investigations with our participants in the natural environment and see how they function. Because sometimes, as you said, with compensatory strategies, just like that, in controlled circumstances, we never see what happens in real life, and therefore we can never translate it into practice for the person who's got this problem. So thank you for sharing that. One of the important things that's come about in scientific research is who should be involved in the CVI research. Not necessarily the data analysis or running complex algorithms, etc. But who should be involved in the research effort? Vision scientists will be. Maybe if vision scientists and clinicians talk to each other more often, they should be, and that is essential. But what is your opinion as to what should happen in this direction of CVI research? Who should be involved?
It is essential that we have CVIers in positions of leadership in our research because CVI is such a complex and unique experience that is really, at least from my experience, a state of consciousness that we do not have words in the English language to properly describe the experience because it is so far different from any experience that a sighted person might have. And so that we need CVIers in positions of leadership in research because they're the ones who's going to have the authentic experience of living with CVI that can't be entirely explained just through words and conversations. And if the CVIer is unwilling or cannot talk to you, you should be talking to parents and family members because they're going to be having the experiences of what happens when CVIers come home from the book group that they love but are extremely exhausted and have to lie on the couch for the rest of the afternoon versus a teacher or a practitioner who might be seeing that child for just an hour at a time and not see those consequences of when you come home from the overwhelming world. And there's an untapped resource in the CVI community, I think, of adult CVIers who have been essential to my learning and growth in my CVI journey.
Me too.
And I think that same resource of knowledge and everyday experiences in a wide variety of settings and job experiences can be really tapped into in the research community. Mm-hmm. And I think scientists can really learn a lot from that group of people.
We've been benefited by adults with CVI so dramatically,
yes,
and by researchers. And I think we never are helped by anyone who is posing a solution that's the only way to do something.
Yes.
And so it's been wonderful to talk with researchers and adults with CVI because they both come from a perspective of always learning more, and that there's not one solution. So I think that there could be a mutually rich relationship there between people with CVI, clinicians, and scientists,
along with the personal experience that they bring to just like living like a really full life with CVI. And that comes with so much experience of how CVI plays out in different situations and with different expectations, like on a person with CVI, and then how your CVI plays out in those scenarios.
Yes, I think if anybody was in any doubt that the people who have got the condition should be involved in research, I think all those doubts have been removed. The fact that, and I've got to let the audience know, you just turned 14 or just about to turn 14, and your ability to convey these concepts that we've been talking about in such a wonderful language and using words that I think everybody can understand and relate to is remarkable. And so I really would like to thank you for all of that, and thank you for putting your thoughts together, not just you, May, but Katie as well. I have one final question for you. And we're going to teleport ourselves, or whatever transportation exists, to a day in August in 2028, 5 years from now. And I'd like you to think and say, at that point, where would you like to be in August 2028 with regards to CVI?
Yeah, so in 5 years, I think CVI should be recognized as a spectrum that has deaf blindness and multisensory processing deficits on that spectrum. We need accommodations such as Braille, O&M, and deaf-blind services to become a norm in the community. And a diagnostic code should be well established within 5 years.
I couldn't agree
Achievable,
more.
certainly achievable. What about you, Katie, as a parent?
I think that's a wonderful summary. I completely agree. I hope that when I talk to parents who are trying to figure out if CVI is part of their child's picture or are wondering if that has been what's going on the whole time, that there are so many links to share, that I hope there's research projects around our country that people can be directed to where they can not only contribute to the research, but be building out these networks of support between other families, clinicians, and scientists. I think that's where the generative hope comes from, is that there are people who understand that this isn't something that happens in isolation in your family where you're just trying to survive. So in 5 years' time, I hope that that network, that spider web of connections and awareness and curiosity fueled research is part of everyone's experience who's wondering if they could get help for CVA.
Thank you to Katie and May especially, and Arvind, of course. And they are all, everyone is in the Zoom chat, so we can take questions. I will be doing my best to mediate in a bit of very optimistic multitasking here.